So a lot of the work that my firm does is based on changing what we eat in North America, largely the US and Canada, in order to promote sustainability, everything from reducing the carbon and water footprint of our diet to introducing new varieties and stocks and sources of food that are better produced, including fish and seafood. And one of the things that we do to help do this is to understand what are the attitudes and motivations of a very select group of about 40,000 individuals who decide what food choices are in front of the public. These are the purchasing, menu, and merchandising decision makers in the US. And the way we get them to make better choices, because believe it or not, sometimes it's not so good, is to also show them what the dining public is thinking. And then we can say to them, hey, your customers want something different, you better change. Or you and your customers want the same thing, you better change. Or look, you are leading your customers, that's great, you better change. And we want to share with you a little bit of a research study we did for some investors in the aquaculture space that looks at attitudes around fish, seafood, and fish farming and seafood farming. And I want to share this because it's also a very ripe opportunity for increasing fish and seafood consumption in the US. We'll talk about why in a little bit. But what the study does is it looks at a couple things, and it'll be released in April. Perhaps F3 will share it with everyone if you want to give me your card so you get the white paper, which looks like this, but the pictures are smaller. You're welcome to do that as well. But this is a snapshot of a couple things. Dietary trends. How are we changing what we eat in the US? Menu mentions. There's about 30,000 restaurants that post their menus online through Yelp, OpenTable. If anyone uses TikTok, I really hate that I have to pay a month before my meal, but that too. And so we also track the mention of different items and also adjectives next to those items. So like if it's shrimp, is it grilled shrimp or is it fried shrimp? So we also have a few pullouts from menu mentions. And then we have some new survey work from a representative sample of about 1,508 adults who matched the census between the ages of 18 and 65 by gender, ethnicity, region, and income, and also a statistically significant sample of those 40,000 decision makers who we call operators, because otherwise it's a really long phrase and we'll be here longer. So first, how Americans eat. Well, here's the big news. Americans right now, 16% of people who say they are meat eaters want to eat less meat. Of the population that says we eat whatever, 6 of them want to eat a little less meat. And of the vegetarians, pescatarians, vegans, and others who drive their family crazy at the holidays, well, they're not changing much at all. But a lot of people in America are trying to eat less meat while still keeping beef on the plate. But they want to eat less of it. So we said, well, then what do you want to eat? Don't make us guess. And the number one option for eating less meat is, and this is no surprise, I'd like to eat less meat. But right behind it is the number 2 choice is I'd like to trade off meat for fish and seafood. And if we went behind this and looked at consumption trends, we would find that the amount of red meat on the US plate is likely to decline by about 20% by 2025, with the baseline year somewhere around 2018. So a lot of what we eat is up for grabs. The share of protein that's up for grabs is basically larger than the entire amount of fish and seafood eaten in the US today. So if we could get those people who at least are willing to keep eating something to switch, it would be a huge opportunity for the seafood industry. Well, what are your concerns with eating animal-based foods that might make you eat less meat? We found that it was animal welfare issues. Number 1 was antibiotic use, and number 2 and 3 were don't be mean to the animals. antibiotic use shows up for us as a unique attribute. We know it's a concern in aquaculture because in the US, for over a decade, doctors have been telling adults, we won't give your children antibiotics because it's not good to overuse them. We need to preserve them to treat the most critical diseases. So we asked them, what would you look for in fish and seafood? And we're going to get into this, so don't get freaked out by wild caught. Don't make me step behind the bulletproof thingy. Number 2 was antibiotic-free, organic. And number 4 was we want to buy farm-raised fish. Well, isn't that really weird that we want wild-caught and farm-raised? Not really. We'll talk about why. We also said, those of you in the back, come forward. What are the attributes that drive you to choose different kinds of poultry? I didn't know we were doing this in a cocktail setting. I thought it'd be a big screen on a stage and all. For chicken and other poultry, seafood, beef, pork, and this plant-based food, everyone thinks the Impossible Burger is like something everyone wants to eat. We actually found out that's not true. That's April's study that's coming out. And what we found is that seafood and plant-based foods, which are kind of trendy in the US right now, have a lot in common. Most people think they're both healthier overall than the other choices. Most people think they're harder to cook with than the other choices, and you can't do as much with them, or we don't know how to do as much with them. And both have some sustainability benefits, although plant-based foods right now are seen as more sustainable. The most interesting thing about fish and seafood is that a lot of people think that someone else in their house would rather eat fish than anything else, which means people are looking for a reason and a way to serve more of this or to go out and eat it more often. Let's take a look at the seafood landscape. This is all teasers. I'm not presenting at Boston. He was wrong, but you can, again, get a copy of the report. How often do adults eat fish and seafood? In the US, 2/3 of adults eat fish about once a month. A little less than half eat shellfish. And, you know, most people eat it all the time, although shellfish, for some reason, is not eaten by as many people. When we asked, when's the last time you ate fish and seafood, more than half people said we ate it in the last week. And mostly they ate it for dinner, followed by lunch, which means eating more seafood at lunch or at breakfast are also really good growth opportunities if you're wondering, what do we do with these products? We also asked the operators, the menu and purchasing decision makers, how often do you menu seafood? And then we asked just the chef segment a little bit more. 81% said they keep fish on the menu year-round. This is a really big number. I won't get into it now, but it means that most full-service restaurants, quick-service restaurants, and fast casual restaurants now all sell fish. And the fish houses that used to dominate, let's go out and eat fish, are now seeing stiff competition from restaurants that sell all sorts of proteins, saying we also always want to have fish on the menu. They want to do it for a few reasons. They want to have that diverse menu so that family member who wants fish won't say, let's not go there. No offense, they might say, let's go to Red Lobster. Now they have another choice. Sorry. It helps me lift my check average. Restaurants sell fish for more than they sell other stuff, especially chicken. And I want to offer a non-meat option. We've done this presentation about what do you want to eat instead for over a year. It's showing up. The best-selling seafood species and the most profitable ones are just about the same, and except for tuna, they're all farmed. Or they can be farmed. So there are lots of good opportunities here on the menu. Interestingly, a little bit troublingly for some of you, we looked at menu penetration. This is the share of all of those menus that contain mentions of the word shrimp or salmon or tuna. Shrimp is number 1. Shrimp shows up on 2/3 of all menus in the US right now. Salmon on over 40%. And then we looked at the change from 4 years ago to about November, December in 2018. And what we found is that tilapia was the single quickest declining item. Salmon was increasing, but most of the shellfish were also going down. What we're seeing is rapid growth in other things like octopus or a subset of tuna like ahi, and also in oysters. So there's a room for other varieties to come on. This is really important because, well, I'm not on that slide yet. We also asked, about some other things, and we didn't actually use words for those of the front row. We said forage fish here, but we actually asked about sardines and anchovies. When we say mollusks, we ask about mussels and clams. A lot of people have already decided they don't like the taste of these products. That's a negative. For sea vegetables, most of them just don't know about them. That's for consumers. The operators are pretty close. They think for the same reasons their guests won't like things that they already decided they won't like, or that they're unfamiliar with. The one thing that is a comment that stood out for us is a fair share of operators think mollusks are too expensive today. And a lot of operators also, and I'm sure many of you know this, think about edible yield. So things like mussels in a bag show up as like, that's not really a pound of food, that's like 5 ounces of food or something like that. Then, okay, that was all the warm-up. Now, attitudes about aquaculture. This kind of surprised us. So what didn't surprise us that much is that operators are more aware than diners of how much this fish is farmed. But they're both a little bit off in thinking that a fair share is farmed far out in the deep oceans, open ocean aquaculture and mariculture, rather than onshore or near shore. This is a potential risk later on because a lot of them have concerns about farming on or near shore compared to out in the water because of environmental impacts. And what we found is that water quality and pollution, antibiotic use, and pesticide use were the most significant environmental concerns of both consumers and the operators or decision makers. And they were the highest concerns for both near shore and also on land. Something to keep in mind. But then we asked something that really surprised us. In the US, we hear over and over again, people prefer wild-caught fish. We think this was one of the first surveys where we asked operators and consumers by species what their preference was. And after you get below salmon, which has had about $500 million of advertising from the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute to convince us that wild is better, and tuna, which, well, not a lot of farm product in the market yet, and shrimp, we find out that for most of the other species, attitudes are not yet fixed. Most people either have no preference yet, no strong preference, or like farmed as much as they like wild. So in other varieties, lobster, crab, whitefish, et cetera, there's still a lot of opportunity to make farmed product the preferred product. Go back to the other things about antibiotics, environmental impacts. There's a lot of opportunities there. The reason that consumers prefer wild caught right now is they think it tastes better. So the connection between feed and flavor or texture would be important if you can prove out how different types of feed can lead to better tasting fish. For operators, they think also that wild has better flavor than farmed. I don't want to talk about what happens next for the industry, but starting to do tastings for, or cuttings as they're called, more often against wild may be a way to either truth test the quality of your product and the role of feed, and also start to build a case for putting it on the menu more often. And also, for those who prefer farmed seafood, and again, once we get below salmon and shrimp, whitefish is one where there's no clear preference. There's also already a belief about better quality and flavor. We do some deeper dives and quotes out of some interviews. We find that people think of farmed whitefish as clean, but also dirty. I can't make sense of any of that. But some people think it has a clean flavor. Other people think it's not a clean product. Few operators prefer farmed over wild, but those who do like farmed because it's less expensive than wild. There is really no surprise there. And that's a quick look at what we found from this. I didn't want to cut in too much to the cocktail hour. I believe there's 3 other people speaking after me. But our takeaways are Americans want to eat more efficient seafood. They're just looking for that nudge over into why and then why farm. Antibiotics and chemical use, which are really only in aquaculture, are a big hurdle and why you're not closing the deal. But most consumers and operators don't have a preference for farmed over wild for most of the varieties they'll eat. Flavor is the most important factor, also price. Antibiotic use and cleanliness matter, and so does familiarity with new-to-market type sufficient seafood, which is why getting it on menus, which is a safer trial, is a great way to introduce new varieties you might want to bring to market. And with that, I want to thank you. He's lifting his glass to me. How wonderful. You've been really wonderful and attentive despite the open bar to my left. Thank you.
Thank you so much.